Hello, this is Mr. Buffington, and this is a lesson on multiplication in variable expressions. We're going to talk about what multiplication looks like inside of a variable expression, and then we're going to talk about the parts of a term. And then, as always, we will do some practice. So, let's start out today by playing the game multiplication or not. So we need to look at these variable expressions and expressions on the board and decide whether they are multiplication or whether they are not multiplication. Whether these are multiplication or not. Let's start off with the blue term over in the far left corner, 7b. Does that mean multiplication? Ding, ding, ding. Yes, it does. That means 7 times b. Even though it's not written in there, it means 7 times b. Let's do another one. How about 8x and that little dot with the 6? Is that dot multiplication? Absolutely. So not only is it 8 times x, it's also 8x times 6. So that's actually two cases of multiplication. Let's go to our purple one, center bottom there, 9 with a bracket 4a. Well, we know 4a is multiplication of 4 times a, but what does a bracket mean when the 9 is right next to that, like a parenthesis or a grouping symbol? Absolutely, that is also multiplication. It means 9 times the quantity of 4a. So 9 times 4a. How about our red, 3x5? Yeah, that's the old way of writing. Usually when you're growing up and first learning multiplication, you'll write a little x in there. We tend to avoid that in higher level math classes because we want the letter x to be a variable. So although this does mean multiplication, it's usually not going to be in a lot of higher level math classes. You probably won't see this in pre-algebra, algebra 1. You'll see the dot and you'll see the parenthesis used a lot more. All right, how about the yellow one? 7 dot bracket parenthesis there, -2. Yeah, that means 7 times -2. Typically when we're multiplying times a negative like that, we'll put those parentheses around it just to keep that by itself. That means 7 times -2. Sometimes looks confusing if it's just 7 times and then the subtraction symbol. We don't know if it's 7 times -2 or what it means. So that parenthesis around the second term helps to keep it less complicated. Which brings us to our final term, -g times -3h, which is also two kinds of multiplication. It's -g times -3h, but -3h also means -3 times h. So I tried to show several different ways that you would see multiplication. A parenthesis right next to a parenthesis right next to a number, a parenthesis next to that dot, a number right next to a letter, or as the older way of doing it, 3 times x there, or just a variable next to a number. This is why we're doing a video on this, because there's lots of different ways to show multiplication. So all of these mean multiplication. So let's go ahead and practice a little bit. 7b when b equals 4. We've done a little bit of substituting and solving before. Now that you know 7b means multiplying, go ahead and solve that one on your own. Pause the recording and try it out. Hey, welcome back. Did you do 7 times 4 is equal to 28? I hope you did, because that's the right answer. b is equal to 4, so we substitute that in there. That means 7 times 4. I could have written it as 7 with the dot and 4, or 7 with an x times 4, but I chose to write it using parentheses. Just a preference. It doesn't really matter. We know it means 7 times b, and b was equal to 4. b4. Let's do another one. I want you to solve this one. -g times -3h when g equals 4 and h equals -2. You have to remember the rules for multiplying negatives to be able to do this one. Go ahead and pause the recording and try that one out. Our first step is substitution. We have to plug in the variable. For the variable h and g, we have to plug in these values of 4 and -2. So just a little bit of background here. This negative g, sometimes people like to call it the opposite of g. So the opposite of our value for g, the opposite of 4 is negative 4, or you can write it like this. You can write a negative and then put parentheses and put in your variable. All right? So negative 4. And what that means is negative times 4, which will eventually give us our value of negative 4. Notice we're adding lots of parentheses when we do this. This is negative 3 times negative 2, because h is equal to negative 2. So it looks really complicated. Let's simplify things down. First off, negative times 4 gives us negative 4. And negative 3 times negative 2 gives us positive 6. So we've simplified this down, simplifying everything inside of the first set of grouping symbols, simplifying everything inside of our second set of grouping symbols there. And we're left with negative 4 times 6, which gives us negative 24. That would be the final answer for that one. A negative times a positive does give us a negative answer at the end. So changing gears just a little bit, and I know this may seem backwards at this point, but I want to talk about expressions. An expression is a group of terms that are separated by addition and subtraction. So each of these represents one term. The first term is negative x. The second term is 4y. The third term is negative 5z. So we take our first term plus our second term minus our third term. And I'm going to break this down just a little bit more, just for to make sure that we understand it. This is a term, negative 5z. The reason I picked this one is because it has a sign, a negative sign. It has a number, which is called the coefficient, and it has a variable, which is the letter at the end. It has the three parts that can make up a term: a sign, a number, and a letter, or the sign, the coefficient, and the variable. What this means is negative, it's a negative overall value. The number is 5, and it's being multiplied times z. Oftentimes we split this up into being negative 5 times z, because it implies multiplication there inside of that term. Negative 5 times z. All right. So let's go ahead and organize a term. I'm going to give you a term, and it is written with multiplication, x times negative 8. And the way that I would organize this is, instead of writing it as x times negative 8, I would simply write negative 8x. See how that's the same information? It means negative 8 times x. It's the same information contained inside of a term. And that's the way we like to write things. We write it with the sign first, the number second, and the variable last. So I've got some practice for you, manipulating some multiplication. I want to know, how would you write this? Negative y times 4. Go ahead and pause the recording, try that one out. Negative y times 4. Did you write it as negative 4y? If so, you're exactly right. This is how you would write that term, negative 4y. The sign goes first, the number goes second, the variable goes at the end. Here's another one. 6 times negative n. Did you write negative 6n? Negative 6n. Sign, number, variable. Sign, coefficient, variable. All right, one more. How about this one? B times 13. How would you write that one? Well, we don't have a sign, do we? And when we don't have a sign on either of them, it means they're both positive. So we would just write this as 13b. 13b. That is our term. If we wanted to add positive 13b, I guess we could, but we don't typically write the positive out front. If it's a positive number, we just leave it as is. All right? So just a quick recap, we talked about what multiplying looks like, and we talked about the parts of a term, and then we practiced with multiplying and with changing around terms using multiplication. Hope that lesson was helpful for you. Have a wonderful day.